World War I was called the war to end all wars, but it wasn't. World War II followed, deadlier, faster, global. Today, 80 years later, that haunting question returns. Are we on the edge of World War III? From Ukraine to Taiwan to the Middle East, the world feels like a giant powder keg. But are these just isolated crises, or is there a real possibility of a global conflict that drags in every major power? In this video, we'll explore how World War III could start, and why it most probably won't.
Level up.
Today's wars don't always look like World War II. They're colder, smarter, more digital. Cyberattacks hit power grids. AI is weaponized. Propaganda spreads in seconds. Proxy wars simmer in forgotten regions. It's still war, just not with tanks and trenches. And it's often deniable, slow, and invisible to the public eye. The big powers are already fighting, economically, digitally, and ideologically, but not with nukes, not with armies on the ground, because everyone knows what happens if they cross that line. So what would it actually take to push the world over the edge, from regional crises to a full-scale global war? It wouldn't be just one event. It would likely require multiple flashpoints erupting simultaneously. A war in Europe, a conflict in the Pacific, and a major explosion in the Middle East, all happening within a short time frame. It could begin with a NATO-Russia direct clash, perhaps triggered by a missile landing just a few kilometers too far, or an unexpected assassination, like the kind that once ignited World War I. Even a terrorist attack or cyberstrike could be misread as an act of war, especially if it targets military infrastructure or communications. A false flag operation, where one nation disguises an attack to blame another, could also manipulate global responses and spiral into chaos. And yet, even then, the world isn't without safeguards. Hotlines between enemies, real-time intelligence sharing, and decades of diplomatic frameworks are specifically designed to prevent exactly that kind of escalation. In a nuclear age, hesitation isn't just wisdom, it's survival. Here are the 3 most dangerous conflicts that could start World War III and why, in each case, it won't. 1. The war between Russia and Ukraine. The war in Ukraine stands as the largest and most violent conflict in Europe since the end of World War II. Entire cities have been reduced to rubble. Millions of people have been displaced, forced to flee their homes, their communities, and in many cases, their country. The front line stretches across hundreds of kilometers, carved by artillery, drones, and relentless combat. And behind it all looms the shadow of a global power, Russia, a state with the world's largest nuclear arsenal. So the question arises, could this war spiral into something far worse? Could it serve as the trigger for a third world war? At first glance, the danger is undeniable. If the conflict spills over Ukraine's borders and touches NATO territory, say through a missile strike on Poland, Romania, or the Baltic states, the response could be dramatic. Under NATO's foundational principle, Article 5, an attack on one member is considered an attack on all. In theory, a single incident could pull dozens of nations into direct military confrontation with Russia. But despite that terrifying potential, a global escalation still remains unlikely, and here's why. First, NATO has been remarkably disciplined. Since the beginning of the war in 2022, Western powers have provided Ukraine with billions of dollars in weapons, intelligence, and logistical support, but they've carefully drawn a line. No NATO troops on Ukrainian soil, and no direct NATO air operations in the region. It's a deliberate balancing act, offering robust support without provoking Russia into believing it's at war with the West itself. Second, the Kremlin also shows signs of restraint. While Russian officials often speak in harsh, even nuclear-tinged rhetoric, their actual military actions have remained contained within Ukraine. They've avoided striking NATO supply lines just over the border and have not launched attacks on NATO installations. Why? Because they know what's at stake. A war with NATO would mean facing not just Ukraine, but the world's most powerful alliance, and the economic consequences would be devastating on top of an already costly war. Third, both sides are deeply aware of the risks of miscalculation. The Cold War taught hard lessons about escalation, brinkmanship, and the thin line between diplomacy and disaster. Today, both blocs maintain communication channels to avoid accidental conflict. Military exercises are monitored. Incidents are de-escalated quickly. No one wants to be the one to light the fuse. So yes, the war in Ukraine is a crisis. It's brutal, tragic, and deeply destabilizing. But despite the intensity of the conflict, there is still a powerful force working behind the scenes. Restraint. Not peace, not friendship, but the mutual understanding that if this war grows too large, there may be no world left to win. 2. The war between Israel and Iran. The Middle East has long been a flashpoint of global instability. a region shaped by centuries of war, revolution, religious divides, and vast reserves of oil. And at the heart of its most dangerous modern rivalry lies a long-simmering conflict between two regional powers, Israel and Iran. On the surface, these two countries are locked in a Cold War that rarely makes global headlines. But behind the scenes, it is intense, deadly, and constantly threatening to spiral out of control. Iran supports and funds a vast network of proxies across the region. This includes Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, Shia militias in Iraq and Syria, and the Houthis in Yemen. These groups serve as Iran's extended arm, projecting its influence without Tehran firing a single shot directly. Israel, in turn, conducts a relentless campaign of preemptive strikes, particularly in Syria, targeting Iranian weapons shipments, commanders, and infrastructure. Israeli intelligence operations, including high-profile assassinations and cyberattacks, have further intensified the covert war between the two. So what happens if this Cold War turns hot? The risk is massive. A direct war between Israel and Iran would not remain isolated. Iran could activate its network of militias across the region. Hezbollah alone possesses over 100,000 rockets aimed at Israeli cities. Israel would retaliate with overwhelming force, possibly striking deep into Iranian territory. The US, a close ally of Israel, could be drawn in immediately. American troops are already stationed across the region, in Iraq, Syria, and the Gulf. Saudi Arabia and the UAE, bitter rivals of Iran, might also join or at least provide support. On the other side, Iran could receive political or even military backing from countries like Russia or China, who view Iran as a counterweight to US influence in the region. Oil prices would explode. The Strait of Hormuz, through which a third of the world's oil flows, could be blockaded. Global markets would panic. Economies already weakened by inflation and supply shocks could stumble into recession. In short, a regional war could have truly global consequences. And yet, despite this terrifying potential, full-scale war has been avoided again and again. Why? Because neither side actually wants it. Iran, for all its fiery rhetoric, consistently avoids direct confrontation. Its military doctrine is built around asymmetry, using proxies and deniable strikes rather than open war. Israel, while aggressive in defense, is not interested in a drawn-out war that could kill thousands and destabilize its already fragile borders. And then there's the quiet diplomacy. Through third parties like Oman, Turkey, or even European states, Israel and Iran have exchanged indirect messages, drawn red lines, and avoided unintended escalations. Finally, major global powers, including the US, China, and Russia, have no appetite for another Middle Eastern war. Not now. Not when the world is navigating a fragile economy, climate crises, and geopolitical realignments. So while the Israel-Iran conflict is real and dangerous, it remains contained. Not because tensions are low, but because the costs of escalation are too high for everyone involved. 3. The possible war between China and Taiwan. Of all the geopolitical flashpoints in the world today, Taiwan may be the most dangerous. It's not the largest, it's not the most violent, but it's the one where two global superpowers could directly collide. To Beijing, Taiwan is not a foreign nation. It's a renegade province, a rebellious piece of Chinese territory that must eventually return to the mainland, by diplomacy if possible, by force if necessary. This position is non-negotiable for the Chinese Communist Party. In fact, reclaiming Taiwan has become deeply tied to its national identity and the political legitimacy of its leadership. Taiwan, on the other hand, operates as a de facto independent democracy. It elects its own leaders, maintains its own military, currency, and foreign policy. Its population overwhelmingly supports the status quo, independence in everything but name. And many in Taiwan fear that if China takes over, their freedoms, press, speech, and democracy itself would vanish. Caught between these two realities is the United States. Since the 1970s, Washington has followed a policy known as strategic ambiguity, recognizing Beijing diplomatically while supplying Taiwan militarily. The US doesn't formally promise to defend Taiwan, but also doesn't say it won't. This uncertainty is designed to deter both sides from making drastic moves. But the stakes are enormous. If China invades Taiwan, the US might intervene militarily. Japan could follow suit. Australia might join. NATO members, while not obligated, could provide support. Suddenly, what began as a regional crisis becomes a massive Pacific war involving nuclear-armed powers. So why hasn't it happened? There are three major reasons. First, economics. China's economy is deeply intertwined with the world. It's the globe's manufacturing engine, supplying everything from smartphones to solar panels. A war over Taiwan would crash exports, freeze trade routes, and likely provoke crippling international sanctions. In a single move, China could jeopardize decades of economic growth and global integration. Second, the military reality. Invasion is not easy. Taiwan is not Hong Kong. It's a mountainous island with rugged coastlines and a population that's increasingly prepared to resist. Amphibious assaults are among the most difficult military operations in history. Even with overwhelming force, success is uncertain, and casualties would be enormous on both sides. Third, deterrence. The US maintains a strong military presence in the Indo-Pacific region through bases in Japan, Guam, the Philippines, and aircraft carriers that patrol international waters. These deployments aren't meant to provoke conflict, but to prevent it. They send a clear signal. Any invasion will come at a heavy cost. Behind the scenes, diplomacy still plays a role. Phone calls, back channels, and military-to-military communication help prevent misunderstandings. War remains a risk, but not a rational choice. So yes, Taiwan is a flashpoint, one of the most dangerous on Earth. But for now, the fear of mutual destruction is holding the line. Despite all the noise, most world leaders don't want a world war because they know they won't survive it, politically, economically, or physically. Nuclear weapons don't just cause destruction, they also stop wars from happening. The idea of mutually assured destruction means that if one side uses nukes, the other side will too. So nobody wants to start a nuclear war. Economically, the world is deeply interlinked. Sanctions hurt everyone, wars destroy trade, and in democratic nations, the public simply won't support another Vietnam, Iraq, or Afghanistan, let alone a global conflict. Even authoritarian regimes have to worry. A prolonged war could cause protests, collapse, or even revolution. We live in a world filled with danger, but also restraint. Russia may rage, but it stops at NATO's door. China may threaten, but hasn't crossed the sea. Israel and Iran may shadowbox, but avoid the knockout punch. The threat of World War III is real, but that very fear is what prevents it. We're not in peacetime, but we're not in global war either. We're in the tension, and strangely, that's where the world has found stability. So, will World War III happen? Not today, and maybe not ever. The world may feel like it's on the edge, but understanding the forces that hold it back is just as important as knowing what pushes it forward. If this video gave you a new perspective, help others see it too. Like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the world's biggest questions. And drop a comment below. Do you think World War III is still possible, or are we already fighting a different kind of war?
Hey guys, I'm David, I'm the founder of the channel and basically the one responsible for everything you just saw. And I hope you liked the video. If you did, give us a like and a subscribe. And if you have any questions or any ideas for future videos, let us know in the comments, and also give us your feedback in the comments as well. Bye guys, see you next time.